my grandpa asked in shock. Buddy, why did you come by taxi? What happened to the BMW we gave you for your 21st birthday? Before I could reply, my mother smirked. That car belongs to her sister now. Grandpa paused, deep in thought, and what he did next made me incredibly proud of him. The taxi pulled up to my grandparents' sprawling estate just past noon on a brisk Saturday in October. I paid the driver, the small transaction feeling like a prelude to something far costlier, and stepped onto the circular driveway. My stomach, a familiar knot of apprehension, tightened further. The house stood exactly as it always had, grand, imposing, with manicured hedges meticulously lining the walkway, and that ornate fountain in the center where I'd once tossed pennies, whispering childish wishes. It was ironic how a place that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a gauntlet leading to an execution. My grandfather, Howard, was already on the front steps, his expression a rapid-fire shift from expectant joy to stark confusion. At 78, he was still as sharp as a finely honed blade, his white hair neatly combed, his piercing blue eyes missing nothing. "Jenna, sweetheart," he greeted, moving to embrace me. But then he pulled back, his gaze sweeping past me to the empty driveway. "Wait a minute. Where's the BMW? Did something happen to it? Is it in the shop?" Before I could even articulate a single word, my mother's voice sliced through the crisp autumn air from the doorway. "Diane." Of course, she'd been waiting inside, probably watching from a window, timing her entrance with theatrical precision. "Oh, Dad, didn't I tell you?" Her smile, saccharine sweet, made my skin crawl. "The car belongs to Olivia now. It just made more sense that way." The words hung heavy and cold between us. My grandfather's face cycled through a series of expressions: bewilderment, disbelief, and then something harder, a look I'd witnessed only a handful of times in my life. He looked at me, then at my mother, then back to me again, his blue eyes holding a new, unsettling depth. "Come inside, Jenna," he said, his voice quiet, almost a rumble. "We need to talk." My grandmother, Ruth, was in the living room. The moment her gaze met mine, she knew. She'd always possessed that uncanny ability to read people like open books, and my open book was screaming distress. My mother, oblivious, or perhaps just uncaring, followed us in, that satisfied smirk still plastered across her face. "Start from the beginning," my grandfather commanded, settling into his worn leather armchair. "And I want the whole story." So I did. I told them everything. It started when I was 14. My mother, Diane, had always made it abundantly clear that my younger sister, Olivia, was her favorite. Olivia could do no wrong. Every small accomplishment was celebrated with fanfare, every failure excused or swiftly blamed on external circumstances. Me? I was the disappointment. The one who never quite measured up, no matter the effort I poured into it. When, at 21, I got into nursing school, my grandparents were ecstatic. They had always been unwavering supporters of my dream to work in healthcare, to truly help people. They presented me with that BMW as a birthday gift, their words overflowing with pride, their belief in me a tangible warmth. It was more than just a car, it was validation, proof that someone finally saw my worth. But my mother, predictably, saw it differently. Within a month, her campaign began. Olivia, she argued, needed a car for her daily commute to the university across town. Public transportation, she insisted, wasn't safe. The used sedan they'd bought Olivia kept breaking down. It would just be temporary, she promised, until they could afford something better. And besides, didn't I live close enough to the hospital to simply take the bus? I said no. I reiterated it at least a dozen times. This car was a precious gift from my grandparents, to me, and I needed it for my punishing early morning shifts and late-night rotations. But my mother was a relentless force. She enlisted my father, Thomas, who delivered disappointed lectures on the sanctity of family and the sin of selfishness. She orchestrated Olivia's tearful declarations at the dinner table about her unsafe commutes. Every family gathering became a referendum on my character. "You're being so selfish," she'd declare in front of everyone, her voice dripping with accusation. Your sister needs this more than you do. You only care about yourself. The breaking point shattered 3 months ago. I just worked a double shift at the hospital, 16 grueling hours on my feet in the ICU, a particularly rough night where we tragically lost 2 patients. I came home utterly exhausted, emotionally drained, craving nothing more than the sweet oblivion of my bed. Instead, I found my mother and Olivia in my apartment. They'd used the spare key I'd naively given my parents for emergencies. My car keys dangled menacingly from my mother's hand. "We're taking the BMW," she announced, her voice flat and decisive. "Olivia has an important presentation tomorrow morning, and her car died again. You can take the bus to work." I was too tired to fight. Too worn down by months of relentless pressure and insidious guilt trips. I let them take the keys. I told myself it would only be for a day or 2. That was 3 months ago. I never got my car back. Every time I inquired, my mother produced a new excuse. Olivia needed it for a job interview. Olivia needed it for a weekend trip. Olivia needed it because she was going through a hard time with her boyfriend and deserved something nice. Eventually, my mother dispensed with excuses altogether. "The car is Olivia's now," she stated flatly when I finally confronted her last month. "She needs it more than you do. You're just going to have to accept that." I had tried to explain this to them before, my parents, I mean, but they simply wouldn't listen. My father merely shrugged, advising me to work it out with my mother. My Aunt Paula, when I called her crying one desperate night, told me I was being dramatic. Even some extended family members seemed to think I was making a monumental fuss over nothing. "It's just a car," they'd say, dismissively. "Family is more important." But it wasn't just a car. It was the crushing culmination of 25 years of being treated as less than, of watching my sister effortlessly receive everything while I worked myself to exhaustion for meager scraps of approval. It was about respect, autonomy, and the infuriating fact that something given to me as a gift had been brazenly stolen and redistributed without my consent. The pattern, I realized, had started so early I couldn't even pinpoint its exact beginning. I remembered being 7, bringing home a math test with a perfect score. My mother glanced at it, offered a perfunctory "good job," and affixed it to the fridge. Yet, when Olivia brought home a C+ on her spelling test that same week, my mother threw her a celebratory party with her favorite cookies and called my grandmother to proudly brag about how hard Olivia had worked. In middle school, I made the honor roll every single semester. My parents attended exactly 1 award ceremony in 3 years. Olivia, however, joined the drama club and landed a minor role in the school play. They attended every single performance, brought her flowers, and took her out to dinner afterward to celebrate. When I dared to ask why they hadn't made such a fuss about my academics, my mother simply said, "Grades are expected from you, Jenna." Olivia's participation in drama is brave and special. High school brought more of the same. I worked part-time at a local grocery store to save for college, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and volunteered at a nursing home on weekends, already knowing my path. Olivia achieved mediocre grades, avoided work, and spent most of her time with friends. Yet, when college discussions arose, my parents sat me down to explain they could only significantly afford to help one of us, and Olivia, not as naturally capable as I was, needed the support more. The twisted logic made my head spin. I was being punished for being responsible. My competence had become the very justification for giving me less. I took out student loans and worked my way through nursing school. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, ate ramen more nights than I care to remember, and pulled all-nighters studying between shifts as a nursing assistant. Meanwhile, Olivia resided in a pleasant apartment, courtesy of my parents' help, received a reliable used car at 19, and had ample spending money for concerts and trips with friends. When I graduated nursing school, my parents attended the ceremony but left immediately afterward for dinner plans. My grandparents, however, took me out to celebrate. They spoke of their immense pride, their awe at my dedication and work ethic. A week later, they arrived at my apartment with that BMW, a sleek black 3 Series with tan leather interior. Every nurse needs reliable transportation, my grandfather had declared, pressing the keys into my hand. Especially one who works the hours you do. We don't want you stranded or unsafe. I cried. It was the first time in years someone had prioritized my needs, had truly seen my struggles, and tried to ease them without attaching conditions or insidious comparisons. My mother's reaction to the car was immediate and chilling. She called that same evening, her voice tight with disapproval. That's a very generous gift. I hope you thank them properly. Of course I did. I'd said, confused by her tone. Good. She'd continued. Because your grandparents don't have unlimited resources, you know. They can't just be buying expensive cars for everyone. The implication was painfully clear. I'd taken something that could have gone to Olivia. Never mind that my grandparents had their own money and could do as they pleased. Never mind that this was a gift specifically given to me for my accomplishments. In my mother's warped mind, anything good that came to me was somehow stolen from my sister. The first time she suggested I lend Olivia the car, I laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. Olivia's used sedan had broken down for the second time that month, and my mother believed it would be sisterly of me to share. I painstakingly explained my need for the car for work, how public transportation simply wasn't viable for my erratic hospital shifts. My mother sighed dramatically, muttering something about how I'd always been the stubborn one. Then came the relentless guilt trips. Every family dinner became an opportunity for my mother to lament Olivia's difficult commute, her worry for her youngest daughter's safety, and how unfortunate it was that some people had nice things while others struggled. She never uttered my name, but everyone in the room knew precisely who she meant. Olivia, to her credit, initially appeared uncomfortable with these comments, but as weeks bled into months, she began to join in. Must be nice to have such a reliable car. She'd sigh wistfully, ensuring our mother was within earshot. I never know if my car is going to start in the morning. My father's approach was different, yet equally frustrating. He'd pull me aside, asking if I couldn't just help out my sister temporarily. You're always so capable, he'd say, weaponizing my own strengths. You could figure out the bus system. Olivia isn't as adaptable as you are. There was that word again, capable. It had become a bludgeon, a justification for me to accept less, accommodate more, shrink myself to make room for my sister's needs. I held firm for months. The car was mine, a gift from my grandparents, and I needed it. But the pressure was relentless. Every phone call, every family gathering, every text message seemed to circle back to the same topic. My mother even recruited extended family members to her cause. My Aunt Paula began making pointed comments about how families should help each other. A cousin I barely knew sent me a lengthy message about the importance of sisterly bonds. The isolation was suffocating. It felt like everyone had conspired to label me the villain for simply wanting to keep something that rightfully belonged to me. My mother was a master at playing the victim, sighing about her worries, how she just wanted both her daughters to be safe and happy. She made it sound so reasonable, so loving. Anyone without the full context would have thought I was being needlessly difficult. Work became my only refuge. At the hospital, I was valued for my skills and dedication. My supervisor, a woman named Karen, a seasoned nurse of 20 years, noticed my work ethic and began mentoring me. She'd weathered her own family struggles and recognized the telltale signs of someone carrying too much weight. You look exhausted, she observed one day during a break. And not just physically. What's going on? I broke down, pouring out everything. She listened without judgment, then offered a piece of wisdom that embedded itself deep within me. People who love you don't make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Remember that. But boundaries proved impossibly hard to maintain when I was under attack from all sides. My mother escalated her tactics, showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with some flimsy excuse. She was in the neighborhood, she wanted to drop off leftovers, she missed me. But the true agenda was always the same: pressure me about the car. During one such visit, she brazenly went through my mail, uninvited, and discovered a bank statement showing I'd been approved for a credit card with a decent limit. "See?" she announced triumphantly. "You're doing fine financially. You could easily afford to take Ubers to work if Olivia needed the car. She's drowning in expenses and doesn't have this kind of cushion." This sheer invasion of privacy should have been the final straw, but I was simply too tired to fight. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week at the hospital, constantly dealing with life and death situations, comforting patients and families through their worst moments. Coming home to more conflict felt unbearable. Then came the night that irrevocably changed everything. The night I was too exhausted to fight back. I'd been assigned to the ICU for a particularly brutal shift. We had a teenage car accident victim who didn't make it, and an elderly patient who coded twice before we finally stabilized him. By hour 14, I was running on fumes, operating purely on automatic responses. When I finally clocked out, I discovered I'd missed 17 calls and 32 text messages, all from my mother and Olivia. My sister's car had died again, this time in a parking lot across town. She needed to get home and then to her early class the next morning. My mother demanded I come immediately with my car so Olivia could take it. I was so tired I could barely see straight. I took the bus home, a 45-minute journey that felt like an eternity. And when I finally walked into my apartment, they were already there, waiting. "Finally," my mother said, as if I'd been out having fun instead of saving lives. "Olivia needs to leave in 10 minutes to make it home at a reasonable hour." I must have looked as dead as I felt because even Olivia seemed slightly concerned. "You okay?" she asked. "Double shift. Lost a patient. Need to sleep." "Well, this will only take a minute," my mother said, holding out her hand expectantly. "Keys, please." And that's when I should have said no. That's when I should have put my foot down, told them both to leave, and locked the door behind them. Instead, I was so depleted, so utterly worn down by months of constant pressure, that I just handed over the keys. I told myself it would be easier to deal with it tomorrow, after I'd slept. "Just for tonight," I mumbled, my voice hoarse. "I need it back tomorrow afternoon for my next shift." "Of course," my mother replied, but there was a subtle glint in her smile that should have warned me. Tomorrow afternoon came and went. I texted Olivia, asking when I could pick up the car. She responded that she needed it for a few more days, claiming job interviews. My mother backed her up, arguing it would be cruel to take away her transportation when Olivia was trying to improve her employment situation. A few days stretched into a week. A week stretched into 2 weeks. Every polite request for my car's return was met with another excuse. Another reason why Olivia needed it. Just a little longer. I started taking Ubers to work, watching my hard-earned savings dwindle with each ride. I cautiously brought up getting my car back at family dinner, and my mother acted as if I was being utterly unreasonable. "She's trying to get a job, Jenna. Don't you want your sister to succeed? I want my car back. The one that was given to me as a gift. It's just temporary. Why are you being so inflexible?" The gaslighting was masterful. Somehow, my desire for my own property to be returned had become the problem, not the fact that it had been taken without real permission. By week 3, my polite requests had escalated to firm demands for the car back, my voice unwavering, my language clear. My mother's response was simply to stop answering my calls. My father, when I finally reached him, declared I was creating unnecessary drama, and should be more understanding of my sister's needs. I called my Aunt Paula, desperate for support, but she had already been primed by my mother's skewed version of events. "You have a stable job and income," she told me, her voice cold. "Olivia is struggling to find her footing. Can't you be generous?" "This isn't about generosity," I tried to explain, my voice trembling. "This is about something that belongs to me being taken and not returned. You're being selfish. It's just a car." I hung up on her. I was done explaining myself to people who refused to listen. Month 2 arrived, and I had resigned myself to using public transportation and the occasional Uber. The financial strain was significant, but far more painful was the emotional realization that my own family cared so little about my well-being. Every time I scrolled through Olivia's social media posts, seeing pictures of her out with friends, my car clearly visible in the background, it felt like a fresh slap in the face. I considered reporting it stolen, but the thought of getting my own family into legal trouble made me sick to my stomach. I consulted with a coworker who had a lawyer friend, and they explained that because I'd technically given permission initially and hadn't formally demanded its return in writing, the legal situation was murky. You need to send a certified letter demanding the return of your property, the lawyer advised. Give them a deadline. If they don't comply, then you can involve the police. I drafted the letter, meticulously detailing everything, but I never sent it. Some stubborn, foolish part of me kept hoping my family would simply come to their senses, that they'd finally recognize how wrong this was and return my car with an apology. I was still hoping for a reconciliation that, I now realize, would never come on their terms. My grandfather sat quietly through my entire narrative, his expression growing darker with each painful detail. My grandmother had tears glistening in her eyes. My mother, who'd been listening with increasing discomfort, attempted to interject several times. Dad, you don't understand. Olivia really needed, be quiet, Diane. My grandfather's voice was pure ice. I'm not talking to you right now. She actually fell silent, shocked. I'd never heard him speak to her that way, ever. He turned back to me, his gaze firm. Where's the title to the car? Still in my name, technically, I said. I never signed it over. I didn't even know they'd basically taken it permanently until it was too late to fight about it. My grandfather slowly stood up. He was a tall man, and even at his age, he commanded a powerful presence. Ruth, get me my phone. Diane, you are going to sit right there and not say a single word. Jenna, I need you to give me Olivia's current address. What happened next was swift and surgical. My grandfather called his lawyer first, a man named Robert Paxton, who'd handled the family's legal affairs for decades. He explained the situation in crisp, clear terms, no emotion, just facts. Then he called a towing company he knew, arranging for the BMW to be recovered from Olivia's apartment complex that very afternoon. But Dad, you can't just... My mother started, her voice shrill. I absolutely can. The car is registered to Jenna. What you did is called theft, Diane. I don't care if you're family. You stole a gift that your mother and I gave to your daughter, and you gave it to her sister. We're correcting that mistake right now. My mother's face went white stark. You're embarrassing Olivia. Everyone will see the car being towed. Good, my grandfather replied, his voice chillingly calm. Maybe she'll learn something about taking things that don't belong to her. While we waited for confirmation that the car had been recovered, my grandfather sat down with my grandmother, and they had a quiet conversation I couldn't quite hear. My mother, meanwhile, was on her phone, frantically texting, undoubtedly warning Olivia about the approaching storm. 2 hours later, I received a text from an unknown number, the tow truck driver. BMW secured. Where do you want it delivered? I gave him my address, hardly believing this was actually happening. My phone immediately began blowing up with calls from Olivia and my mother, which I steadfastly ignored. But my grandfather wasn't finished. He called my father next, putting him on speakerphone. Thomas, this is Howard. I'm calling to let you know that the car Ruth and I gave to Jenna has been returned to her where it belongs. I'm also calling to tell you that your behavior in this situation has been completely unacceptable. You stood by while your wife stole from your own daughter and made her feel worthless in her own family. My father tried to sputter some excuse, but my grandfather cut him off with an unwavering voice. I don't want to hear it. Here's what's going to happen. Ruth and I are updating our will this week. Diane's inheritance is being significantly reduced. That money will be placed in a trust for Jenna instead, which she'll receive when we pass. Additionally, we're setting up a separate fund for her now, enough to cover any expenses she has while she finishes her nursing residency and gets on her feet. Consider it reparations for years of terrible parenting. I gasped, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. Grandpa, you don't have to. He held up his hand, stopping me mid-sentence. Yes, I do. Your grandmother and I have watched this favoritism for too long. We kept hoping your mother would grow out of it, that she'd see what she was doing to you. But she hasn't, and we're not going to enable it anymore. My mother was crying now, ugly, angry tears streaming down her face. You're punishing me for trying to help both my daughters. You're choosing Jenna over me. No, my grandmother said, speaking for the first time, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. We're correcting an imbalance that you created. We love both our granddaughters, Diane. But you clearly don't, and that breaks my heart. The brutal implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. My mother looked as though she'd been physically slapped. The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence after my grandmother's words. I could see my mother processing the weight of what had just happened, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been shame, if she were capable of genuine self-reflection. But my grandfather wasn't done. He pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He'd always been the type to keep meticulous records, and flipped through several pages. Do you want to know what finally made me realize how serious this was? He asked, looking directly at my mother. It wasn't just today. Ruth and I have been keeping track for the past 5 years. We thought maybe we were imagining things, that we were being oversensitive because we're old, so we wrote it down. He adjusted his reading glasses and began recounting entries. June 2020, Jenna graduates nursing school with honors. We attend her graduation. Diane and Thomas arrive late, leave immediately after the ceremony, don't attend any celebration. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but my grandfather continued, unyielding. November 2020, Olivia changes her college major for the 3rd time. Diane posts on social media about how proud she is of Olivia's journey of self-discovery, and shares 12 photos from a celebratory dinner. March 2021, Jenna is promoted to a specialized position in the ICU after only 8 months, something her supervisor told us typically takes several years. We call to congratulate her. Diane, when we mention it, says that's nice and changes the subject to talk about Olivia's new boyfriend. May 2021, Olivia fails 2 classes and needs an extra semester to graduate. Diane spends 3 hours on the phone with us explaining all the reasons it wasn't Olivia's fault: bad professors, unfair grading, personal stress. I'd never realized my grandparents had been paying such close, painful attention. Hearing it all laid out chronologically was jarring. Each example alone seemed small, potentially explainable. Together, they formed an undeniable, horrifying pattern. September 2021, we give Jenna the BMW for her birthday. Within a week, Diane calls us asking if we'd considered that Olivia might also need help with transportation. December 2021, Jenna works through Christmas Day at the hospital because several nurses called in sick. Diane complains at Christmas dinner that Jenna always prioritizes work over family and ruins holidays. Olivia, who slept until noon, is praised for bringing such wonderful energy to the celebration. My grandmother picked up where my grandfather left off, her voice steadied but laced with profound sadness. February 2022, Jenna mentioned she's been having trouble sleeping due to stress from work and family pressure. I suggest she talk to her mother about it. Diane's response, which Jenna told me about later, was that stress is part of being an adult, and that she needs to toughen up. That same month, Olivia has a minor disagreement with her roommate. Diane drives across town at midnight to comfort her, and brings her home to stay for a week. My mother found her voice, shrill and defensive. You're taking everything out of context. You're making me sound like a monster. I love both my daughters equally. Then show it. My grandfather said simply, closing the notebook and placing it deliberately on the table between us. Because for years, your actions have told a very different story. He looked at her, his eyes unwavering. This isn't about the car, Diane. The car is just the breaking point. This is about 25 years of making one daughter feel invisible, while the other gets unconditional support and endless second chances. Jenna has worked herself to exhaustion, trying to earn a fraction of the attention and approval you give Olivia freely. That's not fair, my mother protested, her voice raw. Jenna never needed me the way Olivia does. She's always been independent, always figured things out on her own. Olivia needs more support. Do you hear yourself? My grandmother asked gently, her voice cutting through the tension. You're saying you neglected one daughter because she was competent enough to survive the neglect. That's not parenting, Diane. That's failing the child who made it easiest for you. The words landed like physical blows. I'd never heard anyone articulate, with such devastating precision, exactly what I'd felt my entire life. I'd been punished for being low maintenance, for not demanding attention, for making my mother's life easier by requiring less. My grandfather stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the meticulously tended garden before turning back to face us. When Jenna was 16, she won a scholarship competition. Do you remember that, Diane? My mother frowned vaguely, searching her memory. It was a $5,000 scholarship for an essay about community service. She'd been volunteering at that nursing home for 2 years by then. The award ceremony was on a Tuesday evening in April. Jenna asked if you'd come. Do you remember what you said? My mother remained silent, her face a mask. You said you couldn't make it because Olivia had a friend coming over for a school project, and you needed to be home to supervise. Jenna told us she understood, that it wasn't a big deal. But Ruth and I went to that ceremony. We watched Jenna walk up on stage to accept her award and shake hands with the judges. She was beaming with pride. Then we watched her face scan the audience, looking for you. The moment she realized you weren't there, something dimmed in her eyes. I'd forgotten about that night. Or maybe I'd buried it deep. But hearing my grandfather describe it brought everything rushing back. The bubbling excitement I felt writing that essay, the fragile hope that maybe this achievement would finally be significant enough to capture my mother's attention, the crushing, familiar disappointment when she didn't show. She was 16 years old. My grandmother added softly, her voice aching. She won a competitive scholarship against applicants from across the state, and her own mother couldn't be bothered to show up. But 3 weeks later, you took a half-day off work to attend Olivia's spring concert where she sang backup in one song. I don't have to justify every parenting decision I made to you. My mother cried, but her voice lacked conviction. No, you don't. My grandfather agreed, his voice surprisingly gentle now. But you do need to understand that decisions have consequences. Jenna has spent her entire life accommodating everyone else's needs. Bending over backward to be easy, asking for nothing. And the one time she had something that was truly hers, you took it and gave it away like it meant nothing. He moved to stand beside my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. What you did with that car wasn't about transportation or helping Olivia. It was about reminding Jenna that even the gifts she receives, even the recognition she earns, can be redistributed if you decide someone else deserves them more. It was about maintaining a hierarchy where Olivia's needs will always trump Jenna's rights. My mother was full-on crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You're making me out to be some kind of abusive parent. I've done my best. Do you have any idea how hard it is raising 2 daughters with completely different personalities and needs? Yes, actually, my grandmother said, her tone unexpectedly sharp. We raised 2 daughters ourselves. Your sister Janet was easy, responsible, studious, never caused problems. You were more challenging, impulsive, emotional, constantly in some kind of crisis. And you know what we didn't do? We didn't give Janet less love and attention because she required less maintenance. We didn't punish her confidence by giving her fewer resources. We didn't redistribute her belongings to you because you needed them more. The comparison clearly stung. My mother had spent years playing the victim, casting herself as the struggling parent of an ungrateful daughter. Having her own mother call out the pattern publicly was a profound shock to her system. My grandfather pulled out his phone and made another call, this time to his lawyer, Robert Paxton. He put it on speaker. Robert, it's Howard Winters. I need you to start drafting an amendment to our will. Effective immediately, we're reallocating portions of Diane's inheritance to establish a trust for our granddaughter, Jenna. I'll email you the specific amounts later today, but I want the paperwork started now. Robert's voice came through clearly. Understood, Howard. I'll have the preliminary documents ready by Monday. Will you need this expedited? Yes, my grandfather said firmly. I want everything finalized within 2 weeks. Consider it done. My grandfather ended the call and looked at my mother, his eyes unyielding. That trust will be irrevocable, Diane. When Ruth and I pass, Jenna will be provided for, regardless of what you or Thomas do. She'll have money for a house, for emergencies, for building a life without having to constantly struggle. Consider it compensation for the inheritance of parental love and support that she should have received but didn't. My mother stood abruptly, her purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Fine. You've made your point. You've humiliated me, threatened to disinherit me, and turned my own daughter against me. I hope you're satisfied. No one turned Jenna against you, my grandmother said quietly, her voice laced with pain. You did that yourself. One dismissal at a time, one redistribution of affection at a time. We're just finally acknowledging reality. My mother stormed toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. Her expression was a volatile mixture of rage and something that might have been hurt. You couldn't just handle this privately, could you? You had to run to your grandparents and make me look like a villain. You've always been so good at playing the victim. The accusation was so absurd, so completely inverted from the reality I had lived, that I almost laughed. But I was too tired, too emotionally wrung out for anything but a calm, steady gaze. I came here today by taxi because I don't have my car, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The car that was given to me as a gift, and then taken away. That's not playing the victim. That's stating a fact. Everything that happened after that was Grandpa's choice, not mine. You could have handled this like an adult instead of tattling to your grandparents. She snapped. I tried for 3 months. I retorted, the weariness in my voice undeniable. I asked nicely. I asked firmly. I sent text messages and made phone calls and showed up at your house. You refused to listen. You refused to return my property. What exactly was I supposed to do? She had no answer for that. With a final, furious glare at all of us, she stalked out, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the framed photos on the nearby table. My grandfather continued, his voice softer now. Furthermore, family gatherings will be interesting from now on. Jenna will always be invited. Diane and Thomas, your invitations are conditional on you treating Jenna with basic respect and dignity. Olivia is still welcome. She's young and has been raised with warped values, but she can still learn better if she chooses to. He stood up and placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture of profound comfort. Jenna, I'm sorry we didn't see this clearly before. I'm sorry we didn't protect you from this treatment. That changes now. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. I'd been strong for so long, pushing down the hurt, telling myself it didn't matter that I was being too sensitive. Having someone finally validate my experience, having someone stand up for me without qualifications or conditions, it broke something open in my chest. My grandmother came over and hugged me, then my grandfather joined in, and for the first time in years, I felt truly safe, truly seen. My mother had stormed out, yes, and my father called several times trying to negotiate or explain, but my grandfather ignored the calls. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about other things, my work at the hospital, their recent trip to the coast, my grandmother's book club. Normal family things, devoid of the undercurrent of tension I'd grown so accustomed to. That evening, the BMW was delivered to my apartment building. I went downstairs to meet the driver, and there it was, my car, exactly as I'd left it 3 months ago, albeit with fast food wrappers in the back seat and the gas tank stubbornly on empty. I didn't even care. It was mine again. The aftermath was predictably dramatic. Olivia called me crying, accusing me of ruining her life and being vindictive. My mother sent long text messages steeped in betrayal and the injustice of turning grandparents against parents. My father attempted the reasonable approach, asking if we could all just move past this, without anyone actually apologizing or acknowledging what had truly happened. I blocked my mother's number. I told my father I'd be willing to have a relationship with him if he went to family therapy with me, which he declined. Olivia I left unblocked, a small, stubborn part of me hoping she might eventually understand, though I didn't hold my breath. Some extended family members tried to guilt me about causing family drama and being unforgiving. My Aunt Paula called me selfish again and said I was destroying the family over material possessions. I politely explained the situation once, and when she continued to blame me, I stopped taking her calls too. But there were surprises. My cousin Travis reached out to tell me he'd experienced similar favoritism with his own siblings and understood exactly what I was going through. A few of my grandmother's friends, who had apparently heard an abridged version of the situation, made a point of telling me how proud they were that I'd stood up for myself. Even some of my coworkers, when they heard an abbreviated version of the story, were outraged on my behalf. The following month, my grandparents made good on their promises. Their lawyer contacted me about the trust fund they'd established for when they passed, and they also set up an account with $50,000 in it for immediate use. They told me to use it for anything I needed: rent, student loans, emergency expenses, or even just fun things I'd been denying myself. "You've worked so hard," my grandmother said when we had lunch together the next week. "You deserve to enjoy your life, not just survive it." With some of that money, I paid off a significant chunk of my student loans. I also bought myself a nice laptop to replace the dying one I'd been using since college, and I'd booked a weekend trip to the mountains with some friends from work, something I'd never felt I could afford before. But the biggest change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty about taking up space or having nice things. I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing or constantly prove my worth. My grandparents had given me something far more valuable than money or a car. They'd given me validation and the profound understanding that I deserved to be treated with respect. The holiday season approached with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Thanksgiving had always been hosted at my parents' house, and I wasn't sure how I would handle it. My grandmother, ever the strategist, solved the problem by announcing that she and my grandfather would be hosting instead, at their estate. "Everyone is invited," she said when she called to tell me. "But there will be ground rules. No discussing the car situation, no passive-aggressive comments, no playing favorites. Anyone who can't abide by those rules can leave." Thanksgiving Day arrived, cold and bright. I drove to my grandparents' house in my BMW, which I had meticulously detailed and serviced. It felt like a small act of defiance, but mostly it just felt good to have reliable transportation again. My parents were already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly in the living room. My mother wouldn't even look at me. My father gave me a weak smile and a nod. Olivia wasn't there. She'd chosen to spend Thanksgiving with her boyfriend's family, which was probably for the best. Other relatives arrived: my Uncle Pete and his wife, some second cousins, my grandmother's sister. The atmosphere was tense at first, but my grandmother was a force of nature, expertly keeping conversation flowing and steering it far away from dangerous topics. Dinner was elaborate and delicious. My grandmother had outdone herself with a perfectly roasted turkey and all the fixings. We sat around the massive dining table, and my grandfather said grace, adding a pointed line about being grateful for family who showed up for each other in meaningful ways. My mother flinched but said nothing. After dinner, while people were having coffee and pie in the living room, my grandfather asked me to step outside onto the back patio with him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in glorious shades of orange and pink. "How are you really doing?" he asked, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Better," I said honestly. "It's still hard sometimes. I miss having a normal family, or at least the illusion of one, but I don't miss feeling like garbage all the time." He nodded. "Your grandmother and I have been talking. We want you to know that no matter what happens with your parents, you'll always have us." And when we're gone, you'll be taken care of. We've made sure of it. Please don't talk about being gone, I said, my voice cracking, the thought too painful. You're two of the only people who have ever really seen me. Then we did something right, he said, pulling me into a warm, comforting hug. And you're going to do amazing things, Jenna. Don't let anyone dim your light. We stood there for a moment, and I thought about the scared, exhausted version of myself from just a few months ago, who'd let someone take her car keys because she was too beaten down to fight anymore. That version felt like a different person now. Inside, I could hear laughter and conversation. My mother was talking to her sister about something innocuous, her voice strained but civil. My father was showing my Uncle Pete something on his phone. The family gathering continued, awkward but functional, held together by my grandparents' sheer will and newly drawn, clear boundaries. Over the following months, things shifted into a new normal. My mother eventually sent a short, terse apology text that read more like, "I'm sorry you were hurt," than, "I'm sorry for what I did." But it was something. We maintained a distant, cordial relationship, birthday texts, the occasional holiday gathering, nothing deeper. My father and I went to 2 therapy sessions together before he stopped showing up, claiming work conflicts. I let it go. Olivia and I eventually had a conversation, about 6 months after the car incident. She called me out of the blue one evening, her voice small, vulnerable. "I didn't realize how bad it was for you," she said. "Growing up, I mean. Mom always made it seem like you were just difficult, like you chose to be unhappy. But I've been thinking about it more, and I remember things differently now. Things that didn't seem significant at the time, but I don't know. I'm sorry I took the car. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. It wasn't everything I needed to hear, but it was genuine." We made tentative plans to get coffee, taking small steps toward rebuilding some kind of relationship. She'd started therapy herself and was working through her own realizations about our family dynamics. As for me, I threw myself into my work and my life. I got a promotion at the hospital, securing a position in the cardiac unit I'd been eyeing for over a year. I started dating someone I met through a friend, a teacher named Marcus, who was kind and stable and treated me like I truly mattered. I even took up painting again, something I'd loved as a teenager but abandoned because my mother always made dismissive comments about it being a waste of time. My grandparents remained my anchors. Dinner at their house every other Sunday became a cherished tradition. Sometimes it was just the 3 of us, sometimes other family members joined. They celebrated my wins and supported me through my struggles, asking nothing in return except that I live authentically and refuse to accept mistreatment. One Sunday afternoon, about a year after the car incident, my grandfather and I were sitting on their back porch again. It had become our sacred spot for real conversations. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he asked suddenly. "What?" I replied, curious. "That you didn't let bitterness consume you. You could have become angry and vindictive. Instead, you set boundaries, protected yourself, and kept your heart open to the people who deserved it. That takes real strength." I smiled, a genuine, easy smile. "I learn from the best." "No," he said, shaking his head gently. "That was all you, kiddo. We just reminded you of what you already knew." Looking back now, I can see that day, the day I arrived by taxi and my mother so casually announced she'd given away my car, as a profound turning point. Not because of the car itself, but because it was the moment my grandparents finally saw the full, painful picture of what had been happening. It was the moment someone in my family chose me, unequivocally and without conditions. The BMW still runs great. I take good care of it now, regular maintenance and everything. But it's become more than just transportation. Every time I slide into the driver's seat, I remember that I'm worth fighting for. I remember that boundaries aren't selfish, that self-respect isn't optional, and that family should build you up, not tear you down. My grandfather is 80 now. My grandmother is 77. They're still sharp and active, still hosting Sunday dinners, still taking trips, and living their lives fully. But I know that someday, probably sooner than I'd like, they won't be here anymore. When that day comes, I'll grieve deeply. But I'll also carry forward the greatest gift they ever gave me, the unshakable knowledge that I deserve to take up space in this world, to have my own things, to be treated with dignity and love. And whenever someone tries to diminish me or make me feel small, I'll remember my grandfather's face that day, the quiet fury, the decisive action, the absolute refusal to let his granddaughter be treated as less than. I'll remember that sometimes, love means drawing hard lines and holding people accountable. I'll remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. The taxi ride that started this whole chain of events cost me $23. The year of boundary setting and family drama that followed cost me relationships with people who never truly valued me. But what I gained was priceless: self-respect, validation, and the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am. My mother still doesn't fully understand what she did wrong. My father remains conflict avoidant, preferring peace at any cost over actual justice. Olivia is learning and growing slowly, rebuilding trust. And me? I'm driving forward, literally and metaphorically, in the car my grandparents gave me as a symbol of their love and pride. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes it's simply reclaiming what was yours, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and living well despite the people who try to make you small. Sometimes it's having someone in your corner who sees clearly, acts decisively, and reminds you that you are never the problem. That's exactly what my grandfather did. And it made me truly, deeply proud, not just of him, but of myself, for finally accepting the support I deserved all along.